Here's something that many mesothelioma patients and their families don't realize. Even if the company that's responsible for your asbestos exposure went bankrupt decades ago, you may still be able to receive compensation from them. Asbestos trust funds were created specifically to pay victims even after asbestos companies went out of business. There are over 60 of these trusts holding billions of dollars, and new claims are filed and paid every day. Today, I want to explain exactly what an asbestos trust fund is, how they were created, and how the claims process works. I'm Terri Oppenheimer. I've been writing about mesothelioma and asbestos for the website mesothelioma.net for over a decade. I'm not a lawyer, and this is not legal advice, but understanding trust funds could open up compensation you didn't know was available to you. So let's start with why asbestos trust funds exist in the first place. Beginning in the 1980s and accelerating through the 1990s and 2000s, many companies that manufactured, used, or sold asbestos-containing products faced an avalanche of lawsuits. These companies, they knew for decades that their products were dangerous, and mesothelioma patients and asbestos disease victims were holding them accountable. Many of these companies had massive legal liabilities, more than their assets could cover. To manage this liability while continuing their operations or as part of reorganization when they couldn't continue operating, many chose to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. Under bankruptcy law, when a company reorganizes, they can establish what's called a 524G trust. It's named for the section of the bankruptcy code that governs them. This legal mechanism allows a company to place its assets into a trust that will continue paying asbestos claims indefinitely, even after the company itself restructures or even dissolves. When an asbestos company would set up a trust, it was essentially saying to the bankruptcy court, we're setting aside a significant portion of our assets and putting it into this trust. In exchange, future asbestos claimants have to go through the trust rather than suing our reorganized company directly. The process protected the reorganized company from litigation while still making sure that current and future victims had a dedicated pool of money set aside for them. Now, before I go on, I'm going to take a break and ask you a quick favor. If you find these videos helpful, please hit the like and subscribe buttons below. It makes it easier for other people who need this information to find us. Also, if you have questions or there's a topic you'd like to see addressed in a future video, send me a note in the comment section. And make sure you watch until the end, because I'm going to give you valuable information on where to find resources that will make a real difference for you. So once these trusts were set up, independent trustees took over their administration. These trustees have a legal obligation to preserve the trust's assets for future claimants while also paying current claims. The trusts are designed to remain in the black for decades because mesothelioma has a 20 to 50-year latency period, and victims from past exposure are going to continue developing disease and filing claims far into the future. There are now over 60 asbestos trust funds with total assets estimated in the billions of dollars. Larger trust funds were established by companies like Johns Manville, W.R. Grace, Armstrong World Industries, and many others. These companies were major producers of asbestos insulation, fireproofing, flooring, and other products, and they've been blamed for hundreds of thousands of asbestos-related illnesses and deaths. So how much does each trust pay? Every trust has what's called a payment percentage, and this represents the fraction of the full claim value that the trust is currently paying out. Payment percentages vary by trust and change over time based on the trust's assets and projected future claims. Some trusts currently pay a high percentage, 50, 60, even 100% of a claim's value, while others pay lower percentages like 20 or 25% because they're managing assets to ensure long-term solvency against a large projected claim volume. Payment percentage for each trust are publicly available. The claim value itself is determined by the disease type and severity, the claimant's exposure history, and other factors. Different trusts have different scheduled values for different diseases. Mesothelioma, which is the most serious asbestos-related disease, typically receives the highest scheduled value. So, for example, a trust may have a scheduled value of $200,000 for mesothelioma claims and a payment percentage of 30%. That means it's going to pay $60,000 for a qualifying claim. Another trust may have a scheduled value of $500,000 and a payment percentage of 50% and pay $250,000. The variation between different trusts is enormous, but it's important to know that the compensation can multiply because if your asbestos exposure involved products from multiple bankrupt companies, which is very common for workers in construction, shipyards, or industrial settings, you may have valid claims against many different trusts. So an insulator who worked from 1960 to 1985 may have been exposed to asbestos products from 10, 15, even 20 different companies, and many of them may have established trusts. Filing claims with each of those trusts means multiple separate payments. So when you add them up, total trust fund compensation can be substantial, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars, even if each payment is just a percentage of the beginning compensation amount. Figuring all this out, it's complicated. And that's why it's part of why working with an experienced mesothelioma attorney is so valuable. These lawyers have extensive knowledge of which trusts exist, which products each trust is responsible for, what exposure evidence each trust requires, and how to file claims efficiently across multiple trusts at the same time. Who's eligible to file trust fund claims? The general requirements are that you've been diagnosed with mesothelioma or another asbestos-related disease, that you have evidence of your exposure to products manufactured or sold by the bankrupt company that created the trust, and that you're filing within the trust's claim requirements, which vary. For wrongful death claims, when the person diagnosed has already passed away, the estate or a qualifying family member can typically file trust fund claims subject to specific requirements of each trust. You don't lose the ability to file trust claims because your loved one has died. What does the evidence need to show? Trusts typically require medical documentation confirming your diagnosis, evidence showing that you used or were exposed to the trust defendant's specific products, and often some documentation of when and where your exposure occurred. So exposure evidence can include your own testimony about products you used and job sites where you worked. It could be testimony from former coworkers who remember working with specific products, employment records showing where you worked and when, union records, Social Security earnings records, and other documentation. The claims process for trust funds is generally separate and apart and often faster than pursuing litigation. Trust fund claims don't go to court. You submit documentation to the trust's claims facility, they review it against their criteria, and they pay qualifying claims at the applicable payment percentage. Many trust claims can be resolved within 6 to 12 months. Trust fund claims and lawsuits against companies that are still in business, they are not mutually exclusive. You can simultaneously file claims against multiple trusts for bankrupt companies while also pursuing litigation against solvent companies whose products you were exposed to. These are separate legal processes that can proceed in parallel. Now, a question I hear a lot is about whether filing a workers' compensation claim affects the ability to file trust fund claims. Generally, the answer is no. Workers' compensation resolves your claim against your employer, while trust fund claims are against the manufacturers of asbestos products. It's a different legal relationship. You can usually pursue both. People want to know whether trust funds are running out of money. This is a concern some potential claimants have. The trustees of these funds have a legal obligation to manage assets and pay both current and future claimants. Payment percentages can be reduced if that's what it takes to preserve solvency, and the trusts themselves are designed to continue operating indefinitely in most cases. Still, claiming sooner rather than later is generally a good idea, both because of statutes of limitations and because payment percentages can change. Don't assume that you don't have a trust fund claim just because you don't recognize the company names that established the trusts. These trusts cover products that were sold under many different brand names, and contractors and employees may not have let you know which asbestos products they used. An attorney with access to product identification databases can often identify the trusts you qualify for that you'd likely never be able to find on your own. Asbestos trust funds are pools of money established by bankrupt asbestos companies specifically to compensate victims. Over 60 trusts exist today, and they hold billions of dollars. They're designated for paying claims to mesothelioma patients and families years or decades after the responsible companies went bankrupt. Individual claims, they can range from thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars, and exposure to multiple companies' products can mean claims against multiple trusts. An experienced mesothelioma attorney can help you identify which trusts you qualify for and help you file claims on your behalf. For more information about asbestos trust funds and all of your compensation options, visit mesothelioma.net or call 1-800-692-8608 or use the live chat feature on our website to speak directly to one of our knowledgeable patient advocates. As for me, remember you can post any questions you have below, and I'll see you next time.